Hey all, Warren Pawlowski here, and I have to warn you before we really even get started. This is the third time I'm recording this video, so I may have something of a weird energy today. I don't know. It's one of these kind of videos. Bringing the drunk back to drunk on riding because, man, between a broken tripod, a lackluster framed image, and just poor audio, this is the dissection that does not want to be filmed. But hopefully this will be the third time the charm. So welcome back to Drunk on Riding. Now the third of 4 special Stephen King Dissection Addendums, where we're concluding our exploration of the originally 1978 novel The Stand with a deep dive into its conclusion. Book 3, the aptly named The Stand, and the events of September 7th, 1990 through January 10th, 1991, which, despite covering the longest period of time, Book 1 took place across 21 days and Book 2 over 63, this one covers more than both of those combined at 125 days, but despite that, it's terribly short compared to the rest of the novel. In fact, even in the extended uncut edition, Book 3 is 20 pages shorter than that pre-Boulder section of Book 2 I ranted about in the last video. And that's including the Stu Tom epilogue. The actual conclusion to the tale was covered in just 154 pages. At that same point in Book 1, Larry was just getting used to New York. Harold hadn't even been introduced yet. Fran hadn't broken up with Jess yet. And our main man, Starkey, was still calling the shots. What I'm saying here is this conclusion is short. It's fast. And speaking of Book 1, in terms of pacing, it's very much like the opening chapters. Not at all like the slow, methodical pace of Book 2. With a lot happening in a lot of places, though not really to a whole lot of people. Our cast is actually rather intimate for this outro, made even more so with a series of quick, decisive deaths and one great burn. But after such a long journey, is this seemingly rushed closing satisfying, given the wide breadth of the novel and its numerous plot threads? I don't know. Before we get to all that, of course, if you'd like to hear my thoughts on books 1 and 2 of The Stand, that is Captain Trips and On the Border, head on over to drunkonwriting.com or youtube.com/drunkonwriting to check out the full series and the full library of Stephen King dissections. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe so you're front and center for the next video. And did you know, I know you did not, that Drunk on Writing patrons get early ad-free access to every video and podcast? They do, as well as exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and previews, an exclusive monthly podcast, exclusive wallpapers, and more. Become a patron yourself and see the full slew of offerings at drunkonwriting.com. And to all my lovely patrons out there, including this episode's sponsors, Ariya, Norinth, and David, thank you for making this happen. Now, The Stand's ending starts with a directional switch up as we finally fully delve into the cruel, terrifying, horrible nature of Randall Flagg with a series of bloody chapters and events highlighting his cold-blooded temperament, starting with the grisly murder of our first Boulder spy, the Judge, and of the unfortunate man who botched Flagg's plan to send the Judge's head back to Boulder, Bobby Terry, whose name I have to tell you, I just love to say. It has that same kind of Bloody Mary type ring to it. You know, Bobby Terry. Bobby Terry. You don't want to say that name in front of the mirror 3 times fast. We also start with a series of environmental and world-building details, like how the Judge came to know he was in the West, Flagg's territory, thanks to a hanged man whose flesh was nearly picked clean by the birds, dangling amidst a small grove of trees in a picnic area. Or the way Flag's people turned away from you if you mentioned Flag's name, the way they pretended they hadn't heard. Some of them would cross their fingers or genuflect or make the sign of the evil eye behind one cupped hand. And his smile? Why it was so horrible, King wrote, none of them could have said, but when it turned your way, you felt as if your blood had turned to hot tomato soup in your veins. And these are his own people. I mean, they're not out there made of grilled cheese sandwiches. Although, I gotta say, when the penalty for disobedience is crucifixion, yeah, maybe you don't want to see that grin, especially given what happens to Bobby Terry after he obliterates the judge. He obliterates his face. That's what I mean when I say that. Where we're thankfully told, and not so much shown, there were worse things than crucifixion. There were teeth. After that, we get the surprise unmasking via another Lord of the Rings callback, no less, of Boulder Spy number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Dana Jurgens, who'd worked her way into Lloyd Henry's bed. Flag's second in command was not very happy about it. Well, about Dana being a spy. He seemed to really not much mind her being in his bed at all, actually, and certainly didn't seem to mind telling her much of everything that was going on, including the hustle to get Indian Springs Air Force Base up and running. As Flag spells out, I want those people, meaning, of course, the people of Boulder, hiding in holes by next spring. I want to hit them at night while they're sleeping. Rake that town from one end to the other. I want it to be like Hamburg and Dresden in World War II. Interesting here that he equates the Boulder population with the Germans and not the Allies. He's, clearly drawing aggressor lines here, labeling himself the hero, even on a subconscious level. Also, what a reference. Lloyd even tells Dana how human infrared scope Trash Can Man can sniff out all that machinery Glenn Bateman warned Stu about way back when, all the way up to the A-bomb, as Lloyd says. There's some nice foreshadowing here, by the way, in case you missed, not just, name dropping the big one there, but also the way Lloyd as he'll be dragging one of those back someday. Ain't that the truth? But the bulk of their brief post-coital conversation, at least what we're led in on, is dominated by Lloyd's tale of Eric Strellerton, a smart-ass lawyer, as he describes him, who thought he could run operations better than the walking dude, and who Flag deals with by just looking at him. He looked at Eric for 5 minutes, Lloyd told Dana, and drove him out of his mind. Makes for a really nice setup of expectations when Dana, and us, in many ways, finally truly sits down with Randy Flagg, who really doesn't seem all that bad. What did you expect, he says. A vampire? A skin turner? What have they been telling you about me? And when he's described this way, Randy Flagg's hair was dark, tousled. His face was handsome and ruddy, as if he spent much time out in the desert wind. His features were mobile and sensitive, and his eyes danced with high glee, the eyes of a small child with a momentous and wonderful secret surprise. I mean, is it just me? He seems more like a Danielle Steele sort of walking dude, who has no lines on his palms, and is very clearly an otherworldly liar and manipulator, very powerful one. At that, though he can't seem to prevent Dana from punching herself in the head to break his hypnosis, and comes nowhere near preventing her holy shit moment of a suicide by way of a large, jagged chunk of glass. Ow! Ooh, man, Dana, props. That's the first of 2 suicides, actually, and the second, if maybe not quite as dramatic, is perhaps the biggest surprise of this opening. Harold's one of the emotional drivers of Book 2. With his task complete, Harold's basically thrown away here, both by Flagg and by Stephen King, who Harold suddenly seems another stand-in for. I mean, really, how many other kids do you know who are gifted typewriters instead of Legos? Though if that is truly the case, I mean, man, King must really hate himself. I mean, Harold takes quite the tumble after his motorcycle slips on an oil slick. An oil slick from what? Yes, as lovely How I Love to Love Nadine informs us, this crippling, not quite an accident that sends Harold flying over the guardrail and smack into a dead tree is all part of the plan, all arranged, though Nadine did think it'd be a quick, painless accident to her credit. No fuss, no muss, no bother, as Flagg promised in a dream. But hey, you know, at the very least, a twice broken, gangrenous leg gives you some time to reflect and, again, foreshadow a nuclear detonation. I was misled, Harold writes in a notebook as he waits to die. That is a poor excuse for my actions, but I swear out of all I know that it is the only excuse that ever matters. The Dark Man is as real as the superflu itself, as real as the atomic bombs that still sit somewhere in their lead-lined closets. And when the end comes, and when it is as horrible as good men always knew it would be, there is only one thing to say as all those good men approach the throne of judgment. I was misled. I almost feel bad for him, more so when he realizes he could have been something in Boulder and signs his missive Hawk. I mean, that's nice, though. Given he blew up the guy who gave him that name, I still really don't feel all that bad for him. And I gotta say, I kind of feel the same way about Nadine, too. And yes, I get it. That's probably pretty awful to say. I know. Especially given at one point she wishes she were dead, and especially given her admittedly freely also chosen fate to be shown Flagg's true form, a demon with glaring yellow lamps for eyes, to be lustily feasted upon and taken advantage of with a mind-numbing rape one Flagg doesn't even remember afterwards or care about. As he says, she was pregnant. If she was also catatonic, what did that matter? And, eventually it was also her fate to be just as haphazardly thrown away as Harold. Literally in this case. These chapters, these deaths, they help complete the puzzle that is Randall/Randy/Richard Flagg, to show us his strengths, his reach, his knowledge, but also his weaknesses, his limits, and his ignorance. After all, the judge didn't go according to plan. Bobby Terry. But even before the judge is killed, there's this pivotal moment where it seems he might be able to take out Flagg and end the whole thing if he hadn't left the safety on his Garand. Would it be so unfitting, the judge thinks to himself, if an old geezer could end the whole thing by the undramatic murder of a blackbird in western Idaho? I mean, this is Stephen King, so, no. And clearly, Dana's head-on-a-stick routine didn't quite go according to plan. I mean, same conclusion, the right outcome, but not the right means. And neither did Harold's accident. Even if Flagg meant for him to suffer afterward, he certainly couldn't have meant for him to take some shots at Nadine, too. Could he? No. I can't imagine that he spent all this time grooming her, all of those years, just to let some jackass like Harold off her on a deserted mountain pass. Or, I suppose, for her to take that involuntary swan dive off a Vegas balcony. And even beyond those, the way Trash Can Man snaps and wipes out the whole lot of wannabe pilots setting up the final confrontation, the way Once loyalists abandoned the city of sin in droves, and the way his offhanded decision to leave self-proclaimed diplomat Lloyd in the dark about the so-called red list of top echelon freezoners allows Tom Cullen to reach last by standing status and escape unnoticed. I mean, the dude ends up snuggling with a rattlesnake. I think that says a lot. No. None of that went according to plan. As Lloyd, silently points out, it was as if the old Yankees of Mantle and Marison Ford had lost the opening 2 games of the World Series. It was hard for them to believe, and frightening. Flagg may appear meticulous, collected, absolutely in control, but he's not. He's scared, and he's certainly not omnipotent, though he desperately wants his followers to think so, even if it means crucifying or driving mad those that see through him, because he couldn't see for certain if Mother Abigail died without saying another word. He couldn't follow Trashy, who Flagg feels a certain kinship with, but who he looks at as stranger than himself. And despite adopting his MOON, that spells moon, at one point, he couldn't see Tom. Tom seemed to see, feel, an eye opening in the darkness of the early morning, King Tokendon. A dreadful red eye that was still a bit bleared and confused with sleep. It was turning in the darkness, looking for him. It knew Tom Cullen was there, but not just where he was. And the greatest wonder was that that awful red eye had glanced his way, had passed over him without seeing, and then it had closed again. But you know who that eye can see and who Flagg goes looking for, because Nadine happened to name drop them in the midst of her horny, crazy, suicidal taunting, telling Flagg they're coming and they'll kill you like a chicken-stealing weasel? That's right. Our heroes, Stu Redman, Glenn Bateman, Ralph Brentner, Larry Underwood, and let us not forget Kojak. The group Mother Abigail told to manifest destiny and go west to make their stand. And if I'm being honest here, and I am, with these, I really do try to be honest. When we finally catch up with them, I expected more. Yes, we get a welcome follow-up to Harold's to My Stew's angry, punctuated line. It was just a goddamn waste, particularly so. As well as a callback to the kid who Larry ironically dubs the Wolfman, and further debate about the nature of God and Mother Abigail, but still, when you consider the size of this book and the number of plot lines thread throughout it, yes, here I wanted more. Though, okay, staying honest, I think I wanted more of book 2. Not that we didn't get enough. I mean, watch my last video and I'm not trying to say that we didn't get enough of book 2, but there were certain gaps toward the end of On the Border that were left unfilled, even at the end of book 3, particularly from when this group made their departure. I wanted to see Larry say goodbye to Joe. And I wanted to see how he could manage to say goodbye to Lucy. How he could enter book 3 marching toward his assured death, telling himself he's not a taker. I don't do that number anymore, he thinks at one point, ostensibly addressing his mind mother. I stopped doing that one when the world ended. Honest. He, makes peace with himself, conquers his feelings of inadequacy through what he feels is a watershed moment, the apotheosis of his life. And yet, he left Lucy just like he left that oral hygienist who deservedly hurled a spatula at his head in another life. After dealing with all that drama between Larry and Nadine, Lucy deserved a proper goodbye. I mean, she deserved more than the teary-eyed fainting spell and one-line farewell we left her on, and she certainly deserved more than anticlimactically giving birth to twins, Larry's twins, between the pages. And Joe, I mean, that poor kid, the abandonment he's had to deal with in his few short years. Granted, sure, you know, we see him in the epilogue joining in on the celebration, but even that's barely more than a footnote. Actually, that's a pretty good way to summarize how all of Book 3 feels, isn't it? A footnote. An endnote to Books 1 and 2, the Stan's version of the Animal House Homecoming parade tags. Because while we previously spent chapter after chapter detailing the spread of Captain Trips, and chapter after monotonous chapter getting our characters to Boulder so they could deal with the political ramifications of the post-apocalypse, the entirety of our supergroup's journey west, including their willing surrender, their incarceration, the build-up to their drawn and cornering, and their final climactic stand, is over and done with in just 2 not so very long chapters, at which point the hand of God fills the world with solid white light courtesy of Tracy's last stage of radiation sickness, Baum mea culpa, which is basically the end of the story at large. I mean, Glenn, Ralph, and Larry, our heroes, are dead, sacrificed in the name of God. Our villains, for the most part, are as well. Trash, Lloyd, last-minute turncoat Whitney Horgan, who literally ignites the whole debacle. I mean, even sexbot Julie Lawry, I mean, them and all of their deadly toys, they go right up in radioactive flames. Basically, every main character this side of the Rockies, other than Stu, who proved to be Mother Abigail's one to fall, Kojak, our best God-sent boy, and Tom, M-O-O-N, that spells Tom Cullen, they're all gone. Well, you know, all of them and Randall Flagg. Yes, Randall Flagg doesn't die. Moments before the explosion, Larry happens to look over, and instead of the whining, wailing, window made of pale clear glass faced Flagg from a line earlier, he sees, instead, a bare impression of something monstrous standing in front of where Flagg had been. Something slumped and hunched and almost without shape. Something with enormous yellow eyes slit by dark cat's pupils. Then it was gone. This monster form of Flagg, it books it. I mean, it slips between time and space, or whatever it does to wind up who knows where and who knows when in the closing epilogue. And so while this is still seemingly the end of Flagg's threat, at least, you know, for Boulder, it isn't the end of him. Something Tom Cullen confirms a little later when he says he never dies. He's in the wolves' laws, yes, the crows, the rattlesnake, the shadow of the owl at midnight, and the scorpion at high noon. He roosts upside down with the bats. He's blind like them. I don't know if I read that well, but nice dig at the end there. And, you know, even if it was the end of Randall Flagg, there was that hint in the book. I don't know. Did you catch it? There might be another like him in Russia or China or Iran, but that was a problem for 10 years from now. Might King have a sequel to The Stand in his back pocket? Well, you know, The Shining was given a sequel not too long ago, and given what I've heard about the ending to the new TV miniseries, I wouldn't be shocked. After all, we unfortunately know all too well there's always that new looming threat, always those unprecedented times or potentially world-ending consequences or I gotta say, finishing up this book, wrapping up this dissection, I'm rather grateful King doesn't close out the stand in all your heroes are dead and the world's ending eventually fashion, because he clearly could have. Instead, he ends the stand with yet another directional shift, turning our focus from the existential what ifs and perhaps whens to one remaining question and one remaining mission. That question, of course, is, will Franny and women at large be able to give birth, and will her child and all children survive potential exposure to Captain Trips? And the mission, though we don't precisely see the outcome, the slap-happy ghost of Nick spells it out pretty clearly. Tom and Stu, and if Stu doesn't make it, Tom alone, must tell the others what they saw, that the hand of God came down from the sky and smote Flag and his peoples. Maybe we'll even get a new gospel out of it someday. Yes, the remainder of the book is as simple as those dual focuses, layered atop Tom and Stu's, and Kojak's, can't forget him. I mean, he's the great savior of the story. Their long, perilous journey back to Boulder, which proves far more harrowing than the journey west, despite, perhaps in a way because of the use of vehicles, whether the jump-started 70 Plymouth left like manna in the desert, or the oversized Colorado Highway Department snowmobile they run off the embankment Herald style, though, admittedly, this time without an oil slick. At least it affords us the opportunity to get one of the best lines of the book. In his previous life, the life before Captain Trips, when he had been Big Steve, Kojak had ridden often in his master's car. It was nice to be riding again with his new masters. And while I rather enjoy this section, everything from Stu's shining-esque hallucinations to them unknowingly sitting atop a snow-covered traffic jam, and especially those welcome touches of levity, like Kojak peeing on a dead wolf, Stu hooking up a projector so Tom can watch Oliver and company while he builds Moonbase Alpha, and of course the Charlie Brown Christmas the three of them spend together. Though all of that is great, this epilogue, it feels long again, doesn't it? I mean, almost like it plays out in real time, at least until their clumsy circle dance of tail wagging and celebration when they reach Boulder. Well, at least before we hear the news. The news Stu's been fretting and fearing and hoping to get ahead of. Fran's baby was born, and it's just like Stu's dreams foretold. It was a breech birth, the baby delivered via C-section. And it gets worse. Also, just like in Stu's dreams, Stu's nightmares, though he seemed fine, though Dick Ellis said it was like VE Day and VJ Day all rolled into one, and we're told the whole place got drunk with merriment and I guess, whatever booze they had still lying around. Within 2 days, the baby fell sick with Captain Trips. Imagine coming all this way, facing all those odds, fighting against endless apprehension that tells you it's the flu. No more babies because of the flu. Pregnancy is death because of the flu. A chicken in every pot and a wolf in every womb because of the flu. We're all done. Mankind is done because of the flu. Imagine keeping your head up through all that just to be told All your fears are real, and it's the end of civilization as you know it. What? A kick in the balls. Imagine carrying a baby 9 months through the end of the world just to find out he can't possibly live. And all you can do is wait. Because Fran, just like us, I mean, we know what happens when someone gets Captain Trips, don't we? We've seen it enough times. The bumps, the phlegm, the coughs, the black splotches, always ending the same way. Just imagine the toll that it takes awaiting word on when your baby's found peace. Thank God King didn't stretch out this part of the novel. Just 4 pages later, newcomer Doc Lathrop tells us the baby Peter, named of course after Fran's father, seems to be recovering. Every time the flu shifts, the more tried and true George Richardson explains, Peter is shifting right back at it. He seems to be wearing it out. The world is not ending. In fact, it has a new beginning. Despite all those weapons, those viruses out there still just waiting to be picked up, despite the fallacies of man still being ever present, despite, as we know, evil being reborn as it will forever be, the world, humanity, has a new chance. And so, yeah, to go back to our start here, I think this conclusion, some obvious pacing issues aside, is outstanding. Almost every plot thread sees its due. Almost every character used has a role, a place, and the biggest lingering questions get their answers. Sure, in much the same way Lost simply brushed aside certain details to focus on the main plot, fully embracing the ambiguity of the world, there are still many, should we call them, lingering questions, smaller questions, as well as a simple sense of why. But life doesn't always have easy answers. Some things are never quite as simple because A, then B. And if everything had been tied off in a lovely little bow in this book, I don't think that we would be talking about it nearly as much. It wouldn't be nearly as celebrated, discussed, and dissected as it is today. And it certainly would not have been turned into a comic book or a TV show twice. But we'll discuss that more next dissection. Boy, am I excited for the next dissection, not just because I've now recorded this 3 times and I really want to get there. Cheers to wrapping this up. I really hope this is the end. But this has been a Drunk on Writing Dissection Addendum on The Stand's Book 3, The Stand. If you've enjoyed this episode and watched this far, thank you. You're why I do it. If you'd be so kind as to tell others about how much you loved this video, maybe, mention the channel too, and, I'll leave it to you on whether or not you want to mention I drink beers while I'm talking about Stephen King. I'm not gonna knock you if you want to. I mean, the channel is called Drunk on Writing. However you want to tell them about me, tell it. Bring them in. I'd certainly appreciate it. The channel would appreciate it. Until next time, when we're gonna dive into that new TV series, and boy, I could use a good TV show. I could use a good TV show. We'll see if this is a good TV show. Until next time, cheers, and keep on writing.